It is now 6:01, Tuesday, October 30th, 2018. And I call to order the special meeting of the City Council of the City of Victorville and the City Council sitting as the Library Board of Trustees, Southern California Logistics Rail Authority, Southern California Logistics Airport Authority, successor agency to the Victorville Redevelopment Agency, the Victorville Joint Powers Financing Authority, the Victorville Water District, and the city as housing asset successor. May we have roll call, please?
Mr. Cox?
Here.
Ms. Gomez?
Present.
Mr. Kennedy? Mr. Negretti? Mayor Garcia?
Here.
Mr. Kennedy and Mr. Negretti are absent.
We will move on to public comments at this time, and I'll have our city clerk read the public statement, please.
This is a time and place for the general public to address the City Council on any item listed or not listed on the agenda per Government Code Section 54954.3. State law prohibits the Council from addressing any issue not previously included on the agenda. The Council may receive testimony and set the matter to a subsequent meeting. Comments are to be limited to 3 minutes per individual or less as deemed necessary by the Mayor, depending upon the number of individuals desiring to speak. All communications are to be addressed directly to the Council, not the members of the audience. This is a professional business meeting and courtesy and decorum are expected. Please refrain from any debate between audience and speaker making loud noises or engaging in any activity which might be disruptive to the decorum of the meeting.
Thank you. I do not have any speaker cards at this time. I do have one now. Alejandra?
Yes, good evening, City Council. Good evening, all of you present. I wanted to direct my comment to Eric Negrete, and it's very unfortunate that he's not here. So I will just say it to put it on record, that I don't know what is he special treatment or special, we call him encubrimiento, coverage, to not be present, especially when words are given to family and community services due to his violent crime. And so is he not going to attend these meetings anymore? Is he going to hide like a coward? And we would like to know if he took the treatment on battle a woman and domestic violence, because I have witnessed how he has humiliated and be offensive, aggressive, and bullying other people here. Thank you.
Thank you.
I did receive another card. Bashel, Chef Bashel.
Hi, Mayor. Hello, everybody. My name is Chef Baslin. I'm sorry that he's not there. I wanted to ask him, too. I took offense to his mailer that he portrayed my wife, and he made some statements that were false. One, I don't understand why he had Mrs. Blanca on this negative mailer. Two, he said supports taking money from cannabis. My wife has never taken any money and doesn't even know anybody from cannabis. And then he said, union-backed like Blanca. Blanca's not even in this race. And we didn't get anything from any union. My wife, as the newspaper said today, spent $27,000 of her own money. And so I was just a little offended, Mayor and City Council, that he would say something like that against my wife. I guess what I'm really hurt is because I'm a veteran and he's a veteran. And I just couldn't understand why another veteran would beat up on another veteran's wife. I know this is politics. I know that's how the game goes. But, you know, my wife is a battered woman, and all you guys know. And my wife was very hurt. Battered women, as you stated, Mayor, when you spoke and you were upset for Battered Women's Month, they try to forget, but when somebody brings up something incident, it brings back memories. And my wife was very hurt. I'm not going to never forget that. I'm just not. And to all the women out there who were hurt too, it's just a shame that he would do that. I mean, we might have our differences, but you don't beat up on another man's wife. See, the mistake he made, he didn't know my wife was a battered woman. But he shouldn't have did it anyway to any woman. So my pastor told me to be calm, and I am. I'm going to pray for him. I'm going to pray for him. Thank you very much, Mrs. Mayor. I love you. I would defend you, as I said, and thank you, council, and you guys have done a good job. And to all the battered women out there, I'm going to pray for you too. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, I don't have any other cards. So at this time, we will present the agenda item that we have for this special workshop, which is the street lighting workshop. And the recommendation is that the City Council consider and set priorities for future street lighting projects. At this time, I open the workshop and request presentation by staff.
Madam Mayor and members of the council, thank you for the time. And this meeting has been put together at your request and dating back to the August 7th and August 21st meetings, where we've had discussions regarding the citywide street lighting system. And starting on August 7th, we were discussing the engineer's report, and we're also considering, with the funding source that we have from the street lighting district, where can monies from that district be used to invest in enhancing the citywide street lighting system. And at that meeting, at the August 21st meeting, this council chose to go ahead and proceed in working in the Old Town area and at least initiating a process to improve the street lighting system in that area, and that process is underway. But the council had also asked to have a workshop asking questions as to the methodology used in determining where to install street lights. And I believe it was staff that even suggested that having a more formal plan would be a good thing, because that's not something that we've had over the 5 years that we've had this funding mechanism in place. You'll recall that the street lighting district was formed in 2013 following a Prop 218 protest ballot. And it established and is funded by roughly a $13.98 rate per property in the city of Victorville. But with that, we usually, what we've done in the past is we've identified on a project-by-project basis over the last few years, and what staff suggested and what staff has done resulting from the council's request is put together, resulting from a citywide assessment, an outline as to where we think are the most necessary areas in the city for streetlights. And so with that, Mr. Gangler, Brian Gangler, city engineer, has a brief presentation for you. And I think what our goals are today is to review some of the findings. He'll describe the methodology that he's employed in coming up with what our suggested recommendations are. And then what we're looking for from the council is to help establish policy. Do you agree with these priorities? And if you do, we can go ahead and set forward in incorporating them into a 5-year CIP, and then we can also start working towards having design work done, and even getting preliminary cost estimates so we can start programming into the 5-year CIP, so that at the same time we also know what's required in terms of revenues going forward to fully satisfy not only the operations and maintenance needs of the street lighting district, but also the capital needs. So with that, unless there's any questions further of me, I'll turn it over to Mr. Gangler.
Thank you, City Council, staff, and members of the audience. What I'd like to start off with is a brief update on the Old Town Streetlight project. We had budgeted some money this year for that. Right now, we're in the process of hiring a consultant who specializes in designing streetlights to improve the lighting in Old Town. There's a desire to increase the level of lighting and the coverage. Right now, it's, I think most people would agree that it's not sufficient, and so we're working towards replacing some of those lights on 6th Street, 7th Street, and 8th Street, and also D Street. There are some decorative lights there, so if we could start the slideshow, I'll show you a couple photographs of some of the existing lights. Well, first, this is a map that shows where some of these lights are in Old Town. It's attachment 1 in your package, and some of them are the decorative lights that they're called nostalgic type lights. There are also some Cobra heads mounted at intersections and along some of the streets. Some of them are on wood poles, some of them are on marble light poles, and I'll show you some pictures of what I'm talking about. I may have to go back. Okay, well there is a nostalgic decorative light on a marble light pole, and that's a typical on 7th Street in Old Town. That's the core between Forest and D Street. You're probably familiar with that. So that's a single head, and now here's a double. This is on D Street in Old Town. So that's what it looks like right now. The way the lights are spaced right now and the lighting level, we think could be improved. We don't think there's quite enough light there right now.
Is that because of the kind of the light or the distance between the street lights?
I really think it's a combination of the two. Now here's an example that's at by the fire department building at C and 8th, and there's a Cobra head on a marble light pole, and that's our standard. You'll see those all over the city. So that's at that intersection. You'll see a few of those in Old Town, not too many.
But those seem to work very well. I mean, they give good lighting.
They do. They give very good illumination. And then here is, there are some overhead utilities. So here's an example of an intersection in Old Town, and it's a Cobra head mounted on a wood pole. Those are relatively inexpensive to install. Almost all the intersections in Old Town have enough light. The intersections themselves, but as you go along some of the streets there, we think it could be improved. So I'm open for any questions about Old Town if anyone wants to discuss that.
Now, is East Street included here? I didn't see it.
East Street? It was not included in this initial project. If you want us to take a look at that and expand it.
I certainly do, because it is part of, they call it Old Town, I call it downtown.
Okay.
But it should be included. I've had some people ask me if we were looking into their part of town. So,
Okay.
okay, thank you.
I have a couple of questions, Madam Mayor. I'm assuming there's an adopted standard on the output of the street light and the distance apart for the whole city. For residential area, for industrial, commercial, I'm assuming there may be some differences. But if that is being followed, or if it should be adopted by the council and followed, then the output should be equal every place in the city. So there shouldn't be any particular place in the city that's darker than other places in the city. And that's the question. Do we have a policy? Is the policy being followed?
Yeah, we do actually. So typically in the city, you'll see, I'll go back to this slide. You'll see this kind of a street light. It's a Marble-Light pole. It's Edison owned. And it has a certain illumination level. And we have 2 levels. The arterial streets have a higher illumination level, and all the other streets are a little bit lower in a residential area. And typically the maximum space between the streetlights is 250 feet. Sometimes you'll see 200 feet or less. And typically in a new development, you'll see them staggered. They'll be on one side of the street and then the other side. And then you also have a street light, at least one at every intersection. So that's pretty much the city standard. But having said that, some of the older areas of the city, especially those that may have been part of a county area and were annexed later, you're not going to see all those standards necessarily followed. So, and we'll get into that a little bit later. There are some areas in the city that have little to no street lights, and we'll show you a map of those too.
Well, if I might, I don't want to get ahead of you. There are areas that have no street lights because the city of Victorville had a street lighting district when it incorporated, and when areas annexed, they did not annex into the street lighting district and produce no revenue for putting in street lights nor paying the energy bill. So we have large areas of the city where those citizens did not pay into the street lighting fund, and now that we have a street lighting district throughout the whole city, I'm assuming the goal that we discussed when the city council adopted that is to eventually have street lights throughout the whole city. But there's a question that I think requires a discussion by the council before we go into areas and put street lights to standards. The question of the council, should there be a policy to put street lights in those areas on intersections only where there's warrants such as accidents or high amount of foot traffic? And secondly, do we go back and correct the areas that are deficient, such as the downtown area and some other areas? I think those are policy questions that the council should discuss, because no matter how much money we have in the streetlight fund, we don't have enough money, to do all of those things at one time. And so I think that the council's going to have to set some priorities, and it might actually take a tour of the council to see what we have at night in those areas and the areas that are dark. And I know that the engineering department and the employees are doing their share, but there's a large number of streetlights that do not work. I'm not encouraging the council to go out at night, but there ought to be a map somewhere where people can report a light at this area is not working, hasn't for 6 months, so that we can address those. Those don't require capital outlay. They require a new bulb or something. And as an example, between 6th and 7th Street, it's the Curvature Street north of Union. There's a street light there. I don't think it's been lit in the last 3 or 4 years. Maybe they don't want it lit, but it's there, and I can show you other ones like that just aren't lit. But I don't know how the council wants to approach that. I have to say that I took the mayor on a tour because of complaints in the 7th Street area, and I think there was 24 streetlights that were out in a 5 square block area. And I waited 6 months and went back, and those lights were still out. I mean, there's just a large number of lights that if we would put a new bulb in, it would improve things. But I don't know. I called Edison, and they told me they're a great company. I don't mean this to be negative, but they told me to go to the pole and find the number and report the number, and they'd replace it. I told them I'll find the numbers and we'll take it out of the bill when we pay them every month, because we pay them on the basis that all the streetlights are lit. If they're not, we shouldn't be paying taxpayers' money to receive a service we're not receiving. And they indicated, well, it's our responsibility, our being the city, to report to them where those lights are out. I knew this was coming up. I didn't pursue it, but that's another question. Council, I don't want to dominate it all the time. That's another question. Whatever the council wants, do we want employees to check those? Do we want residents to call them in? You know, who's going to have the responsibility of notifying the utility company that these lights, certain lights are out and seem to be out most of the time?
I can give you some information on that. We do have staff that go out on a 6-month cycle in the city. The city is separated into 3 different sectors, and they actually do a nighttime survey and prepare a report of which streetlights are not working. With the poll numbers, they submit that request to SCE, and then we maintain a spreadsheet with that list. Now, unfortunately, we don't have control over when those lights are replaced, and then sometimes they'll appear again on the list. And sometimes I've heard from our staff that it's a little bit difficult to track, because sometimes when you get the report back from SCE, it doesn't have the information you need to determine the exact location. So we are trying, but frankly, sometimes the response hasn't been what we had hoped for as far as replacing the lights.
Well, they should be providing us with better information then.
I agree.
I mean, everything falls on the city. It seems like it doesn't matter who's responsible. It doesn't matter what's happening. When it comes down to the bottom line, it comes back to the city. But they are the responsible party, and they should be performing.
Well, it's interesting. Isn't Juan from SCE your point of contact?
He is one of the points of contact.
So I talked to the SCE, and it's very interesting because the information that I get from the city, and when I get direct information from Southern California Edison, it's just like there's no communication between us and them. And so I don't know what the bridge gap needs to happen, but from my perspective, right now we are throwing them under the bus. When I had a conversation with them not a week long ago, where it's us not communicating with them. So who is it, they or us? Because I'm getting from them different information and from us different information. And I think I need to refer them to this video today so they can see how city council and how the city is talking about SCE instead of, what is taking place right now.
We have expressed those concerns to them. As a matter of fact, as I recall, we met with them just last week. And so that we do communicate with them, and our staff also communicates with them. That's about all I can tell you.
I got an email today. It says we don't have trouble, we don't have any problems. But as I hear this, it seems like we do have an issue. I received the email today.
I'm reporting to you what city staff have told me who are involved with the streetlight survey. I spoke to them this morning, as a matter of fact.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, as it relates to SCE and the relationship, that's actually something that I, over the last couple of years, had put quite a bit of effort in trying to bridge the gap in the relationship with Edison. So I'd certainly like to believe that it's better than it has been in a long period of time. There was a period of time back when we were taking on the municipal utility where the relationship was adversarial, but we talk regularly on multiple different issues, and in fact had probably 5 or 6 reps here last week talking just about this very subject, streetlights.
So I don't know if you want to discuss the Old Town area anymore. We can. If not, I can move on to the city at large.
I have a couple of questions with the street lighting. If we approved it, why is it in discussion today?
I think really this is a response to, we wanted to lay out before City Council priority areas in the city and try to establish a priority for possible streetlight projects to add streetlights in areas that currently are deficient. They have little to no streetlights. That was one of the reasons for this workshop.
Right, but if we already approved the street lighting at Old Town, why is that a part of our discussion today? Is it because we have to prioritize between 1 and 5 how Old Town will be established? Is that what you're saying?
It was simply just to give a status report. That was all
Okay.
about Old Town.
And then if we're going to be using a consultant, and how did we determine the amounts?
Those were preliminary cost estimates. We don't have any well-defined cost estimates right now, so those were just preliminary before we had a design. So right now it's just a budget amount. Until we actually have a project designed, we won't have well-defined costs for the project.
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
I understand the necessity of having a plan and adopted policies and a maintenance plan and who reports to get the lights fixed and so on. But I'm not quite sure of two questions. What is the need of the consultant you referred to, and what does that cost?
We don't have a fee yet, but in my opinion, I would like a consultant to give us some guidance, especially if we're going to be using non-standard lighting in Old Town, if we're going to stay with the decorative type lights. Those are special lights, and so the placement and the illumination is different. If we just went with the standard poles, it wouldn't be a problem at all. We could just go with our city standard spacing. We wouldn't really need a consultant for that, but if we go with the decorative poles, I would recommend using a consultant for some guidance.
I hope the council will discuss that. My understanding is that several years ago, there was a request by, I guess, the downtown business people, or I don't know exactly who made the request, to have different or unique lights placed downtown. And the lights that are on 7th Street, I've heard from the downtown meetings that I've attended that they wish they didn't have those because they don't put out enough light. So we have an extra cost for a light that didn't work, and maybe it just changes the bulb. But I think that's another policy question of the City Council to discuss. Are we going to stay with a standard light standard throughout the whole city, or are we going to have different kind of lights in different parts of the city? I noticed that La Mesa Nisqually interchange at the freeway have a bell light that the state put in that doesn't look anything like our lights, and I don't know who decided that or where that idea came from.
That's true. Those are Mission Bell
Yes.
type fixtures, and they're on the Nisqually interchange. And actually, the reason that happened was initially, to be honest, it wasn't actually planned that way. And when they appeared, we got comments from some of the city council members at the time that, why don't we just keep them that way? We'll just keep the Mission Bells. So it wasn't really a council direction to install them, but they were there, and we decided to keep them.
But I hope since the City Council is discussing this and we have the public and we're looking for public input, everyone will weigh in so that hopefully when this is over with, we're all in agreement on what the next step is to be so that we don't deal with different areas of the city, different costs, different light standards, different distances, and we can get these, I think if they're somewhat uniform and decided on, then everyone knows what to expect, and it'd probably be cheaper too in the future. So,
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem Cox, as to the types of lighting, and it was one of the reasons we met with Edison last week, because the question we had of them is, do we have to build standard or non-standard? And right now we're talking about Old Town. Let's focus on Old Town, because that's what the council had asked us to proceed on. So as it related to Old Town, and the reason why we were asking if they would be willing to consider non-standard is because, of course, we've recently adopted the Old Town specific plan, and it does carry a Route 66 theme in there. And one of the things that Edison does have in its book of standards is, I think it's 4 or 5 specific types. So the Cobra head we've talked about, that bell that you talked about, even though we were surprised it showed up at the Nisqually interchange, that is one of the 4 or 5 that are pre-approved by Edison. And that's important to us in knowing their position as to whether or not they would allow non-standard, because the way streetlights work is, at least in Victorville, with a very small exception out at the airport, either the developer or we would build the streetlights. We do the design work. We do the installation. They will do the energizing of the lights, but eventually that light becomes dedicated to Edison because it's connected to their electrical system, and then they become the one responsible for the maintenance. So why they at least share with us why they've got standards is because if something goes out, breaks, car hits it, or what have you, they have a standard inventory they can pull from so that they can respond quickly to be able to reactivate that light. So what we're attempting to explore with Edison already is, are you willing to consider something that's not in your book of standards? And I think part of the reason for this consultant as it relates to Old Town is one of the objectives in Old Town, especially with respect to our efforts and interest in trying to revitalize, is to illuminate it better, but we're not lighting experts. So that becomes the question. If we bring in a different type of light, what is that light going to be? What is the illumination going to be? What are the distances? So I think the consultant more so is focused on this one project as we speak.
Also, I will hope staff explain to the council that when the subdividers put in all these lights in the subdivisions, this city could, and other cities do, require them to put in the lights, spend the capital, and dedicate them to the city. And their city property is not Edison. On the other hand, if they're dedicated to the city and city-owned, the electricity bill to light these is far more. But I haven't seen those figures in a long time, and I don't know what the cost analysis would be today. But years ago, the council had a consultant that recommended that all the lights be owned by the city. Somewhere along the line that was changed, but we have a number of street lights that the city owns, and most of them Edison own. I don't know if that's important, but I think in order to have a full discussion, the council, at least I'm not speaking for the council, I'd like to have that kind of information just to look at.
Okay.
Well, I also believe that it's important to have something that's standard, something that we know what we're going to have. And if we have to implement a new contractor to come in and have specialty lights on something, and as we can see, Mr. Messler states that SEC eventually takes over, but if it is in case that there is no communication gap and SEC, for whatever reason, has not been able to turn on the lights, would we have something of this expectancy in the future? So I'm for dedicating and getting a policy so that we have something that's more standardized rather than something where we are not sure what is happening here.
Okay. I can give you a brief update on the buyback. Edison had a program where cities could purchase the streetlight system, and then the city would own and maintain it. But that program has closed. We don't know if it will open again, but there was a window when some cities were pursuing that. I think it closed a little over a year ago or 2 years ago.
I have a question. I'm interested, staff, with who did you meet at the SCE last week in terms of this discussion? What are the names of the people that you guys met?
We could get you a list. I'm not going to remember all the individuals.
Okay, well, if you can get me a list, I would appreciate that. Send it to my email. I know the city manager is understanding that I'm making that request for that list of the people that you guys have the discussions with. So I'm expecting that list through email and a hard copy. Thank you.
And I can tell you that the person you referenced, Juan Lopez, he actually led that meeting. He was there.
Are there any other questions or discussions regarding Old Town?
I don't have any other questions. I think we covered pretty much
Okay.
questions that I had. Have anything, Jim?
No, I don't, not on Old Town.
Yeah, not on Old Town.
Okay. Then I can move on to the next slide. So we prepared a map of areas in the city that are deficient in street lighting, and on the map, and you'll see these numbered areas, and the numbered areas represent areas that they're deficient in street lighting. They have little or no street lighting. As an example, if you look at area number 1, we call that the square mile area, and it's where we recently did a slurry seal project, and it's bounded by Bear Valley Road, La Mesa Road, Balsam, and 7th Avenue. And there are almost no streetlights in the interior. There are some on the perimeter of the, Nisqually Road has streetlights on it. There are a few on Balsam. But other than that, there are almost no streetlights in the whole square mile area. So that area is deficient in street lighting, and as well as the other areas that we've numbered. And in general, those were some areas that were lower density residential. They were annexed into the city after the city incorporated, and they just never, when those areas developed, they didn't have a streetlight system that was installed. So those are areas that we could identify future projects to add streetlights, and so I evaluated these areas, and I'm recommending this priority, and it's basically based on the size of the area and the number of intersections that have no streetlights at all. As an example, in Area 1, it's almost a square mile in size. There's actually a table that we attached that compares some of these areas, and in that table, I believe it has something like 50 intersections that don't have any lighting, and so the priorities were based on that. And so I'm opening that up for any questions or discussion.
So did you just say that the priorities were based on if there was the least amount of street lighting in terms of the actual, I'm going to call them the major and super arterial roads? Is that what you were saying?
The recommended priority is based on the size of the area and the number of intersections that don't have streetlights.
So we're not going to say that in the entire 72 square mile of our city, it's just these 5 areas, but these are the beginning 5 areas that you have thought should have been prioritized. Is that accurate?
Those are, of all the developed areas within the city, those are the areas that are deficient in street lighting.
Brian, would it be, just maybe to help, accurate to say that of all the locations in the city, these areas have the highest concentration of no street lighting?
Yeah, for what I call developed areas, because there are large areas of the city that are undeveloped. There are either no roads or dirt roads, or maybe a few scattered single-family homes here and there. But as far as what I would call a largely developed area of the city, where there are paved roads, there are occupied homes, these are the areas that are deficient.
But you also said narrowly residential, and I assume that it wasn't highly developed, but more land space and no residential areas. But that terminology probably doesn't mix, right?
They're generally developed areas. There are a few vacant lots here and there, but they're all residential, and they have paved roads, and they're already developed.
And I know one of my colleagues has stated something about the tree lighting assessment. So now I'm a little bit concerned with if everything was under a street lighting assessment, but there is multiple areas that were gapped and weren't a part of it, and now we're covering it, how are we as a city going to be able to maintain these areas if they're under the city's ways of operation and maintaining them? Or are we going to discuss policy, discuss something standard, and then implement an assessed district, but then you would have a Prop 218, you would have to convince the property owners?
There's already a citywide streetlight assessment district that extends to the city limits. So there's no need to change that. It was formed in 2013. And so properties are already being assessed for the streetlight assessment district. When a property develops, say a residential tract is developed, then the assessment for that property changes, because once that property is developed, it's assessed at the full rate. But if it's just vacant land with nothing, say if it's residential vacant land, no paved road, it's nothing there, it's not assessed.
So I was looking at the streetlight funding, and it says it's $1.3 million. Is that what we have left after taking the $250,000? It's on the report. And I'm asking because not too long ago, I had a couple of meetings, and I was told that our fund was at $2.1 million. So was there something that we took and we've done already?
You must be looking at attachment 7 at the end of the report.
Yeah.
Well, you'll see that in the top line, we set aside a reserve. And so that reserve is set aside out of the streetlight fund. It's an operating reserve for 3 months of expenses. And so that, I think that's the difference you're seeing. So after you take that out, the available cash is less. That's probably the difference.
So it's typically what we do with all our fundings. We always have a reserve minimum of 3 months in general principle.
We have done that with our water and sewer rates, but it's not necessarily the same with every fund.
To answer the question as to the 1.3, my understanding is the $1.3 million figure that you're speaking to is particular to capital that's expected to occur in this fiscal year. And I believe, Brian, the 2 projects that comprise that 1.3 are a street lighting project out at SCLA, and then I believe the Old Town appropriation is included in that 1.3 as well. Is that correct?
There is. There's actually a detail below that shows the capital projects that add up to that 1.3 million.
There you go.
So that means after we're done with the 1.3, what do we have to prioritize unless we save another, 5 years that it takes us to come up with 2.1 million at $13 and somewhat cents for residents to pay into the assessed district lighting?
And Councilmember Gomez, and for the rest of the council, that's precisely why we're here. And the attachment and the cash flow that we're talking about is kind of a little bit further along in the conversation, but we're certainly prepared to have it now. But one of the points that we did want to make as a part of the analysis, and remembering the reason why we're here as a council at the last meeting dealing with streetlights was questioning our priorities, how are we determining priorities, and what is the methodology that goes into it. So what we've done here is intended to kind of lay that out for you, what would be a good way to approach setting priorities, and assuming that the council concurred with these priorities or had a different set of priorities. The point of attachment 7 with the cash flow is, notwithstanding whatever it is you select, we wanted to give you a sense of what the cash flow looks like going forward. So particularly I'll draw attention to the column dealing with fiscal year 1920, 2021, 22-23, and you'll notice different than the $1.3 million figure that we just talked about that's called capital expenses. You'll see zeros or dashes, but the dashes represent zeros.
I'm sorry, as a point of order, are you on attachment 7 or what page are you on?
Attachment 7, yes, same one that you're looking at. So the point that I was trying to make was, once the policy is established by the council, we can then develop a capital improvement program so that you can start planning for the improvements to be made. And once we start getting cost estimates as to what those improvements are going to cost, we effectively then can plug them into those cells in the spreadsheet that have blanks so that you have an idea of how your cash flow works going forward to try to make sure that we're not overspending the fund as we take on these policies. And if what it will also tell you is that if your capital expenses are tremendous and you absolutely believe we need them, it will also tell you if you need to raise the rate on that 1397. We're not presupposing that, and that would have to go through its own process to raise the rate. But at least this becomes kind of a budgetary tool to kind of figure your cash going forward. It's just an attempt to get a sense of where you're at without overspending.
I have a comment or question when you're finished. As I remember some time ago, that in putting up signals or streetlights, determining where the streetlights should go, there was a combination of factors such as accidents. People make jokes about it because automobiles have headlights and people don't, but nevertheless, auto accidents are taken into account. Crime, number of pedestrians in a particular area, which is, I think, one of the reasons we have the safe routes to school because of all the kids. Was that used to establish these areas, or did we just use the knowledge that we have about these areas?
No, I considered some of those factors, but there was a lack of information to make a good comparison among all the different areas. And so I considered traffic volumes too, but the traffic volumes inside those areas are generally low and roughly comparable. As far as sidewalks, there are no sidewalks in those areas. It basically distilled down to what I thought was the size of the area and the number of intersections in the area that don't have any streetlights.
What I was leading to is two things. I think the council needs to decide, even though there may be a lack of streetlights, do we want to put streetlights in areas that have no sidewalks? The intersection I can understand, but do we really want to do that? Or are we going to help set priorities based upon where they have curb gutter and sidewalk? The other thing that I don't have an answer to, and I'm sorry I didn't have time to look up anything. The first thing I wrote down is, well, we have to maintain the safe routes to school. And then it occurred, schools are during the day. And I'm not sure the students are going to school at night, and I'm not sure why that's so important to have streetlights for the students to get to the schools. I mean, how does that work?
Yeah, I would agree with you. Generally, most school activities are during the day. There are some in the evening, but generally it is daylight hours. Yes.
Personally, initially it was a priority for me, but the more I thought about it, the more I looked at the schools, I don't think it's that high of a. I don't think it's the most important. It's not in the top 5 for setting priorities, but I didn't know how we did that.
And in my opinion, though, if the city council wants us to prioritize these projects and embark on a capital project to install streetlights in these deficient areas, the intersections should be the first priority. That's my opinion.
Thank you.
So I need clarification on that. Is he discussing the 3 school zone flashing beacons and the 8 crosswalk safety flashing beacons? Is that the same thing, or is that totally different?
No, I think the comment was what factors should be considered in prioritizing these different areas, including should we consider pedestrian traffic, should we consider schools, should we consider other factors? And I didn't really have good information on all the 5 areas on those things to make a good comparison. So in the end, that's why my recommendation was it was simplified to be based on the size of the area and the number of intersections that didn't have any streetlights.
So that I'm clear as staff, and I actually think the comment from Councilmember Cox is a good one. Does it make sense, especially knowing a square mile area as an example, which is item 1, intersections being priority? It sounds like that feedback could be helpful to us in shaping the policy that where there's no sidewalks, because that may have some good sense to it, that if there's no sidewalks, do you necessarily need to have street light there, because there's likely a lessened amount of pedestrian activity.
I don't know if I would agree with that statement. I've been going around with a lot of residents, especially on 7th, where we have that major construction that's happening. On 7th Street, where there's a school, there are no sidewalks. So we're in the verge momentarily to make these sidewalks available. So I don't know if we can generalize it and say if this is the case, then this should be the issue, because the variables aren't straight cut black and white as they were just expressed. And the perfect example is, like I'm saying, on 7th Street and Nisqually, there are no sidewalks, and we're in the verge of creating those sidewalks right now on one of the areas where there's a school site.
Right. Each area has some features that are a little bit different. On 7th Avenue, as an example, we will be installing sidewalk in the vicinity of the school at Burwood. And 7th Avenue already has some streetlights on it now, whereas the interior of that Area 1 basically has almost no streetlights at all. And I was more concerned about the intersections in the interior. So that there could be a number of factors to consider, but as I said, we don't really have all the data that we could have to compare all the areas. It can be difficult to get counts on pedestrians. It can be kind of scattered data.
That $13.98 per EDU, is that only residential? That's also commercial and industrial that are paying this $13.98?
So a typical single-family home would pay $13.98 a year, and that's one EDU. But other property types are assessed at a different rate. I don't have the table with me, but commercial and industrial would be assessed at a different rate based on their land use and the size of the parcel.
Okay, because I'm a little bit concerned, but I think you can clarify that. If we have $8 million in reserve, which is a 3-month that you said, we're spending $500,000 for Old Town and roughly $4.6 million in SCLA. My concern was, if we're using the $13.98 per EDU, which is single house per home, why would we use that money to pay for SCLA, which we already approved? But of course, you can clarify if that's not what's happening, because that's not been reflected in this report or in reports prior with me being in council.
Okay. Well, this is a citywide assessment district, and it extends throughout the whole city limits. And when the Streetlight Assessment District was formed in 2013, it made a provision for capital projects. In addition to operating and maintenance expenses, there can be some capital expenses, so they are eligible. It's just a matter of if City Council wants to prioritize them, and if City Council wants to approve those expenses.
Okay, and so it's just a little bit clear, just a little bit, but again, I'm still understanding that we as taxpayers under the single home with the $13.98 are going to be paying with SCLA or the lighting over there. So why didn't we consider, when we're considering schools and sidewalks, the same thing for SCLA, which is a very, it's also a very dark area, but if it's not that developed, why would we be using our monies over there and not using the same rationale and spending, $4.6 million, whereas in our residential area like Old Town, it's $500,000. Do you see what I'm saying? So if my understanding has some type of irrationality or it's not clear, it's because that's what I'm seeing as I'm reading the document. So if you can, to me, you've substantiated my thoughts. But if that's not the case, I'm going to give you another opportunity, because this just sounds irrational of what has just happened right here. SCLA, this many, and what about the other 272 square miles of the city when you take out the airport?
Well, so SCLA, the Phantom Loop, is that project's underway, but that is deficient in street lighting. Street lighting there didn't meet our standards. It basically didn't have street lighting, and then. The other areas in the city, that's really why we're here. We wanted to bring them to City Council to see if you wanted to give us direction to pursue installing streetlights in these deficient areas and prioritizing them for future projects. So that's exactly why we would want input from City Council on what they think would be important for future streetlight projects.
Madam Mayor, if I might, I need to raise attention to one item, though, because I think there is an impression Councilmember Gomez is giving to the public that suggests that the city and its taxpayers is subsidizing streetlights out at the airport. And I think it's important to recognize, because I think it helps the conversation, that SCLA is not immune to paying into the streetlight district, and I don't know the exact number, but just the airport authority itself probably pays $80,000 to $85,000 a year into the district. That's not to mention all of the individual users at the airport that also pay into the district. So, I think it would be inappropriate to leave the impression that the airport or the industrial customers out there are benefiting on the backs of the more local residents in Victorville. They are paying a share into the district, pretty significant share, and I think appropriately, where we've identified, as Mr. Gangler has said, deficiencies, then it's our responsibility to address the deficiencies in the totality of the street lighting system.
And then
That's true.
To make myself clear, because I'm not under an assumption, it's what I've read into the documents, and I've asked for clarification on multiple occasions, one-on-one with staff, and it's been denied. So the clarity that I'm putting here is not to hoodwink the public, but it's personally what I've seen. And so I, as one of the council members, which is 20% of the vote, need to make sure that not only I and the other council members, but if the public has any sense of what is taking place today, that it needs to be stated out and clear. And my rationale for this was, in 2006, we were going to be guaranteed by a developer 1,000 jobs over by 395, closer to the freeway, which was a Winco distribution center. $4 million for the developer. However, at that time, we had the director, who was Keith Mesler, who said, no, you will come over here, pay $16 million, $4 a square foot, 30 to 40 minutes in traffic, and we lost 1,000 jobs. So my thing is, what I'm seeing right here, right now, is the same implementation of what we're doing with the street lighting. So I did not say that we're subsidizing it. I didn't know that the SCLA was paying into it, and that's what I needed to know. Where in the documents has that information been displayed? And if it has, I have not seen it, why wasn't it embedded here as a line item so that it's clear for any missing gaps for history when you have council members coming in? Because as I come in, I need to make sure that I'm trusting of what my administration is doing today. And I need to make sure that the city of Victorville residents understand that they can also trust me as a government official, that I'm doing the best interest and accountability for them to bridge that gap.
Questions, Madam
Go
Mayor?
ahead, Jim.
I keep reading, I'm a little confused, and clarify, please. Phantom West Street Lighting Project, 194,000, but I keep hearing it's 4.6 million. Is that because some is already done, or what? Somebody explain why there's different figures. I'm sorry, but I can't find the 4.6 million for Phantom West. The attachment 7 list for Phantom West, 194,000.
The 194,000 and change is the actual budget amount for the project. That was in the agenda item that went to City Council.
That's currently budgeted in the adopted budget? Okay.
In an amended budget, yes.
And the reserve, what is the reserve? Is 553,000? Is that what we expect to have in reserves, or that's what we budgeted in reserves?
Well, that's what we're recommending to be in a reserve.
Okay.
No policy has been set yet, but we're recommending that.
Okay, did I misunderstand that we have $8 million in the street lighting fund?
I believe that's what was said, but that doesn't seem to jive with the numbers that we actually have in the spreadsheet. So I'm not sure where the $8 million came from.
Well, I think a lot of important questions have been raised, and I think staff should clarify. I don't want to see at the expense of one area that we're putting in capital for another area that's not paying their way. I don't want to get down to the nitty-gritty of making allegations of any kind, because in most areas of the city, the subdividers put in the street lights, charge the homeowner's already paid for the capital in their neighborhoods where they have lights. They are now being assessed $13 and some cents per year to pay the energy charges. That's generating more money than for the energy charges, and then of course that goes into signalization for areas that are needed, the public safety lighting, and to start on areas that don't have any signals at all. And initially, when street lighting districts are set up, it's sometimes divided between capital and ongoing expenses. We didn't do that, as far as I understand. So that areas such as the 1 square mile or Area 2, they would have a separate charge on their bill annually, one for capital, one for energy charges. We just have the one charge, and so there's no way we have enough money to go in and put in all the capital and without them paying for it. So there's a subsidy already I think we have to accept that. There's going to be a subsidy. But I think in regard to the base, because that's a touchy issue, I do think that should be explained if staff can about what they're paying and what they're getting. But again, I want to be careful how we have the discussion, because I can argue that all of these subdivisions that paid for capital are now going to have to pay for Area 1, 2, and 3 when they should be paying for it. I think there's an overall public benefit to the whole city to have the streets well lit, and I think we just have to learn to share into that, to share it.
And actually that public benefit was recognized in the engineer's report when the district was formed, because there's both a special benefit and a general benefit. So even though an area may be deficient in street lighting, it also has a general benefit because people tend to drive in different parts of the city.
So I would benefit from having a meeting with staff in terms of understanding this. I'm not making allegations. I just know that there is absolutely no trust with administration. And if the people can trust me, but I can't trust my administration, then we have issues. Then I will bring up stuff at the forefront, and perhaps some of them may contain a couple of errors, and other ones will be truly factual. And in order for me to be able to speak on behalf of the people, I need to have full access to inquiring to staff members whether the city manager would like to be there or not. And I've done these requests on multiple occasions, and my numbers that I gave you were just approximations, just right now throwing them out there, but they come with rationales of principles that I've seen historically from the community's understanding of what's taking place. So my knowledge is coming a lot from the community, not very much from staff members. So again, this is basically just saying, if you want me to sit up here and give you nothing but fact, perhaps I need to sit nothing with inquiries with staff members. And this has been said on multiple occasions with the city manager, who has rejected on multiple occasions. So these discussions will continue as long as I am here, and I'm hoping that we can bridge some sense of trust, but I can't do it by myself. And unfortunately, this is the way I have a perspective, and I've not been adopted with my culture or with the way I use linguistics and my age, and that's very unfortunate. And I think we're coming to a close where diversification is going to be seen at the city council. So I think we need to start embracing that type of difference and understanding that our community is also a very diverse community. And so I will continue to bring what I am reading and my interpretations. I appreciate your assistance thus far right here at the dais openly.
It's not a part of the street lighting discussion, but I would like to find out about the 1,000 jobs you cost us sometime when you have. I've never heard that before, so. Madam Mayor.
Not to get away from item number 1 here and going into number 4. And that's Alabado. And I can't read the other streets.
Are you referring to attachment number 4?
The map.
Okay. So this attachment number 4 is a comparison of the 5 areas that you see up on the map, and it shows the size of the area, the total number of intersections, and then the number of intersections that don't have any street lights. And it has some comments with some additional information. And this is what I was talking about. It's it's a rather simple comparison, but the priorities were basically set on the size of the area and the number of intersections that don't have any streetlights.
And they also don't have any sidewalks, right?
They don't have any sidewalks. Now, one area has some curb. Area 5 in the Golden Triangle has some curb, but no sidewalks. None of these areas have any sidewalks.
Yeah, because those are the complaints that I have received from that particular area outside of Old Town and East Street. And I'm concerned about that particular area there, since I've had several calls on that one. I would suggest that we look into that area and see if we can, because here we're supposed to be actually just trying to give you the information that we feel is most important so that we can comply with the request of the public and whatever is needed. And I feel that this area here is of importance and should have priority over number 5, I believe it was. No, over 1.
I'm sorry, which area were you talking about?
I'm still on number 4, and I believe it takes priority over number 1.
Okay.
I mean, that's my request.
Yeah, I have no problem with shifting the priorities. All these areas are deficient in lighting.
Mm-hmm. So, if we are supposed to recommend to you what areas we feel are priorities, I don't know if, Jim, do you have something else that you feel?
I don't have enough information myself I know staff has looked at this and they've come up with the recommendations, and I'm not saying I'm opposed or for. I just like to have a lot more information about the traffic, the amount of traffic in the area, crime rates, the schools, children walking, crosswalks, unlit intersections. I think I hope as a result of this kind of a meeting, we're going to have a lot of input from the public that's going to help so that we can agree what the priorities should be, but I'm not prepared to do that now. One member of the council. No.
I had a few individuals write to me, and they've also stated this on the record. If you recall, this individual asked for lighting on Hickory and Sitting Bull off Nisqually, and you can, I think it's already a part of this. I see the word Nisqually in there, but I don't know if it filters it in there, so you can see if it does or it doesn't. The other one was El Rio and Maricopa, which I'm assuming it's the outer unincorporated area, which was just last annexed into the city of Victorville. I'm assuming that reading this map, that area of El Rio and Maricopa is also a part of this. You can clarify that as well. And the last writing that I had was Little Beaver and Balsam Avenue by Nisqually Road. So I don't know if that area is here, but you know the map better. You can tell me if these areas are already incorporated there.
El Rio and Maricopa should be in Area 3, and
Okay.
Little Beaver would be in Area 1.
Oh, perfect. And these are just something that I got within a week's time. But as Mr. Cox said, I think you're the expert in this. I've not done a tour of the area in the city to look at what is the darkest place. I just asked the community, so I don't have any personal interest. So I'm with Mr. Cox. Besides these 3 lights, they're already in there. We probably do need a little bit more information, and I was hoping today that the study, we would have involvement of the actual community, maybe having things on the wall stuck and having people put the areas, some kind of interaction with the public rather than something so intimidating as a courtroom as we sit here. It's almost like we are the one that speak and the community has to wait and listen. And so I was hoping for something more interactive with the community.
I agree. I have a question. If you look at the area on number 3, I'm assuming that we're going to light the intersections, but there's probably 20-some intersections that is between the city and the county. Have we approached the county in sharing the cost of lighting on those intersections, that half of it's the city, half is the county for all that area in number 3?
No, we have not.
Has the county ever agreed to share lighting when it benefits their area as well as the city?
I've never dealt with him on lighting. On traffic signal projects, we have shared. We do have some cost share agreements.
Just curious. It certainly would benefit. It might be worth a simple request. Also on Bear Valley Road on item number 1, there's, I believe it's number 1 that has an outer Bear Valley Road.
Yes.
And the signals go where? Between the island, or there's no signals there?
Only, not on Outer Highway. There's only a signal at 11th. There's a signal at Bear Valley and 11th.
Do we need signals there? There are businesses that are there.
We don't need additional signals there.
Okay. Well, as businesses go in, though, they're putting in sidewalks, and I've noticed a couple put in streetlights, but not everyone. I mean,
Yes.
because it doesn't exist, I didn't know if we intended to light it or not. I just, an area to look at.
That's true. That's a standard requirement.
Okay.
Number 3, is that the Montview Acres?
And, yes.
It's around?
It's adjacent to Mountain View Acres. Yes, it is.
Okay, so that's why we have the county and the city
So it
connected there.
yes,
Okay.
it borders the county.
So, in other words, for clarification, Area 3 is not Mountain View Acres, which is an unincorporated area, because this Area 3 is annexed, in my understanding of what I'm reading right now.
Correct. It
Okay.
borders Mountain View Acres,
Right.
but Area 3 is in the city.
Got it.
In regard to street lighting, excuse me, I received, I believe it was an email from the Edison rep some months ago that starting in the spring, they're going to have a new lighting system that they're going to start replacing our current bulbs with a more efficient or more output. Is staff working with Edison on that?
That is correct. There is what they call an LED retrofit program. The latest update we got when we met with Edison last week is it's supposed to start in the second quarter of 2019. And so they will be replacing all the existing lights with new LED lamps. And it will be more efficient, and the lighting will be slightly different. We've already requested that conversion take place. There's no additional cost. The capital costs will be absorbed over time into the rate that we pay, so we won't see any increase in our rates.
Since this council is talking about priorities, has the Edison company suggested any priority on where they're going to stop, or is it going to be random, or northern part of the city first, or what in that program that they're starting?
And we haven't set the priority first. They told us that when it gets closer to the actual construction project, we need to meet with them to tell them what our priority is. One of the things that we thought would be good would be to start in the Old Town area of the city. But other than that, we really haven't established a priority of a sequence.
Okay. If they're going, for example, if they determine, or if everyone agrees that they start in Old Town, would the city put in streetlights where they're needed with the new bulbs, and then they would change the old, or we wait till they change the bulbs and then see what's lit and what's dark and add streetlights later? Which priority comes first on that?
Right, and that all depends on the timing of the project and where they are in their schedule. because it's a little bit different replacing the lamps in the non-standard lighting, is what they told us.
Sorry to take so much time, but thank you for your answers.
Okay, so we start with Old Town then? Is that the suggestion here? Or is that already,
Well,
Yeah,
and we were
already
talking about the
approved.
LED retrofit project, which is supposed to start in 2019, and that was our thought as far as staff, is to start in Old Town.
and then in the meantime, we will see what other areas will come next?
Yes.
Well, I think we're going to be surprised at the input from the general public. I know Marcus indicated that she has people contacting her. I've had people contact me. I think once the public understands that they can increase the lighting in those areas, I think we're going to have a lot of input. So I hope we're prepared to actually look at those areas when people talk about the need for streetlights.
So do we have a date when we're going to revisit this again so that we actually have input? Because to be honest with you, this 24-hour meeting type of deal, I don't know how many people knew about it, but I would like to spread the word as a council member to have as much input, even if it's 5 more people than today. I think that's more beneficial than just us up here thinking what we should or shouldn't have. I think that's important. So if we could set a date or have an approximation, I think that would greatly help for the community, at least the people that are here. If we have 10 people here and each one tells one person, that's doubled already.
I agree. I think we should have as much input as possible.
I think I'm waiting for a response, you know.
Oh,
Usually
oh.
when it's quiet like this, I ask later on, well, no motion was made, this
Oh.
and that, and I just worry about
It
that.
was clear that we got our direction to.
Well, we're just giving
report
direction
back.
to
I'm sorry,
staff.
Brian, I didn't hear what you're saying. So as a point of order, if I can listen to what he responded, it would greatly assist me in helping the community as well as our council members.
Well, it's clear to me that we got direction to report back to City Council in a future workshop. I suppose it should be a workshop setting with more information, with some of the discussion that took place. You had asked for more information for these areas that are deficient in street lighting. Am
Well,
I
I
correct in my
believe-
understanding?
I believe that is correct. But with the holidays coming up, I don't know if we can actually set up a time, a date. At this time, anyhow.
Mayor, we can take a look at the calendar, and the other part of it is to give a long lead time for public input. So
Okay.
I'm hearing that clearly, so we can do that and look for something in January.
All right. That sounds
Make
good.
sure that we can get the word out to the public so that we can get a lot more input on it.
So for January sometime, I appreciate that.
Very good.
That's fine with me, and if there's a reason to have the meetings in the area affected, I'd be agreeable to do that, because let's say, I'm not suggesting it, but if you meet downtown, most of the people there are going to be talking about downtown, and we can be
And
more
we should have
specific
that coming
to
up.
that area, and then we can meet in other areas if the need is. Because now we're talking the whole city, and I know we have some people here that are interested in their area, and if we met in those areas, we'd have more input and more individuals that would be participants, so something to think about.
So I'm assuming that when Jim says "we," it's also inclusive of the council. He doesn't just refer to as staff meeting in those specific areas that are right here prioritized. That's my understanding of "we" means.
Well,
Just, I
that
don't know.
was what, I did
Okay.
mean that, and I'm sorry, I should have said I, but I'm willing to meet in any of those areas at a time that is agreeable, that the council is available, so we can get the maximum input possible.
And so am I.
Okay, if there's, I guess we can come to a conclusion on this item.
Do we need a motion to make that happen, or is it
There's
just
no motion needed here.
right? So I know there's a consent at least of 2 council members that would like to meet in their respective areas, and I know we're looking at January, but I know that we haven't made this official, and it's been in the past my understanding that, well, there wasn't in Blanca, there was no motion made. So no, it's not going to happen. So I just want to make sure that the sentiment has been heard, and if it's not going to essentially happen, that I understand that, because now I'm under the assumption that we're going to have staff look at those areas and council look at their schedules. Can we, at least 3 of us, make it there? Or can we all make it there?
I second that intent. That's very clear. I think,
Okay,
what
so then
we're
I would make
requesting.
that motion.
I second it.
Thank you.
End of discussion. Okay. At this time, I will request declaration of
Madam
closed
Mayor?
session.
Can I have the motion on the record? Motion by Ms. Gomez, seconded by Mr. Cox. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries with Mr. Negretti being absent. Mr. Kennedy abstaining.
I abstain.
I have no further questions at this time, but thank the staff for the information and thank the public for turning out for such a dry subject. But I know a lot of people are interested in this for a lot of reasons. So I think we'll have a lively discussion in the future on this.
By the way, that motion fails right now because you have 4 members here as a quorum, and you only have 2 affirmative votes.
And as a point of order, I appreciate the city attorney clarifying that for the public. So that's important for you to be aware. It's not going to take place in terms of we meeting at different little sections. So thank you for that clarification for myself as well. I appreciate it.
Correct. I think the motion fails, but I think staff still knows what the direction is and what the intent of the council is.
I agree. The staff heard the intent of the council, even though the motion has failed. I would expect it to be carried out anyway. I have no further comments, Madam Mayor.
Can I proceed?
Yeah.
At this time, I request declaration of closed session items by our city attorney.
Thank you, Mayor Garcia. We have one closed session item this evening. It is anticipated litigation pursuant to Government Code 54956.9D2. The facts and circumstances are set forth on the agenda pursuant to Government Code 54956.9E2. To the extent there's reportable action, we will report it at the conclusion of the closed session.
Thank you. At this time, we will recess to our closed session.
All right, we had one closed session item this evening. Item A was anticipated litigation pursuant to Government Code 54956.9D2. Facts and circumstances related to that are set forth on the agenda pursuant to Government Code 54956.9E2. At this time, there is no reportable action with respect to that item.
At this time, I adjourn the meeting.